Hey, what's up, everybody? It's good to be with you this afternoon. If you don't know me, let me introduce myself. My name is Darren Greenfield. I am the founder and lead strategist at Invert Strategies, where we help organizations, businesses, brands, and leaders establish the clarity that drives their genius. We love to be the scout to somebody's sniper. We love to be the coach to help people work through their mechanics. And we also love to be a listening partner, helping organizations, leaders, brands, and businesses work through whatever challenges they need to work through when it comes to their growth or when it comes to their business or brand or organization or leadership strategy. Well, what I like to do every once in a while is I just like to drop in and give some value content to my organizational leaders out there, my brand leaders, my entrepreneurs, everybody out there who is leading something, who is leading a organization, a business, a cause, who is trying to start something. I always want to be able to drop in and give you a little value add information from Invert Strategies to help you possibly work through something that you are going through. And so what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about growth. I want to talk about growth. If you started a business, if you started an organization, you are leading a brand, everybody knows what they're going after is growth. We all want our businesses to grow. We want them to scale. We want them to do well. We want our products to do well. But the question about growth is not how bad we want it or what we're willing to do to get it. The question about growth is, can we handle it? There are so many organizations out there who are looking for growth that they are actually experiencing growth right now. And what proves true when you get in the middle of growth is if you can handle it or not. And there are two things that happen. I call them the two GPs. The two GPs. You either go through growing pains, which all of us go through. None of us can avoid. If your thing is growing, you're going to go through growing pains. But if you don't manage your growing pains the right way, you go through this second GP. And this second GP is what I call growth paralysis. That the lack of handling your growth the right way or the lack of doing things the right way when growth is upon you actually paralyzes your business, your brand. It actually paralyzes your leadership. It actually paralyzes you moving forward. That's what I call growth paralysis. And what I want to do today is I want to just spend a few minutes with you and I want to show you how to work through growing pains and how to recover from growth paralysis if you're already in a place of growth paralysis. I have my notes here because I want to dive deep with you, as deep as I possibly can in this few minutes. And I want this to be super intentional. I want you to be able to walk away with some notes. So before we get started in talking about growing pains or growth paralysis, I want to define these for you. Let's start with growing pains. What are growing pains? Growing pains are when you are feeling the challenges and difficulties of new levels of operations, productivity, or climbing to the next level of your vision without you intentionally noticing or preparing for this growth. It's just boom, it happens out of the blue. You were doing some things prior and you did them well, and they brought people to see you, or they moved your product, or they got people to join your mission, your foundation, whatever it is. They got people to buy into your brand. You're hiring new people, and you knew that this was coming one day, but you didn't know it would be this soon. And you start to go through what we call growing pains. And what happens with growing pains is that you notice that your business is growing and everything isn't clicking the way that it used to when you were a less productive or smaller organization, team, or brand, whatever you are. And you start to experience some of these things. Maybe it's communication lapses inside the organization, not only internally with your teams and the people who work with you or the people who work for you. You start to experience communication lapses with your clients or your customers. Things aren't getting handled the way that they need to. You start missing phone calls or drop dates or emails. Communication lapses start to happen because you're growing and there are new steps that you need to add to your processes and procedures, and you haven't done that yet. So maybe you're experiencing communication lapses. Or maybe your team is overwhelmed and missing the intricate parts of their tasks. They're getting sloppy when it comes to paying attention to detail. And when this happens, it's not always because they aren't paying attention or they aren't doing their job well. It's because they have too much fear that taking the time to pay attention to one thing may make them lapse in the other duties that have started to call their name because of your growth. Here's another thing that happens when you experience growing pains. People start to retreat to silos. Teams, instead of being outward facing within your organization, they become more inward facing to one another. Why do they become more inward facing? Because their main goal is no longer about an organizational win, but instead it's about avoiding a team loss. They understand that there's a little chaos involved with things. They understand that things aren't happening as well as they used to, that maybe we're not performing as well as they used to. And instead of looking outward and saying, let's fix this as an organization, let's fix this as my team with the next team, what they do is they say, we don't want our team to be responsible for what's going wrong. So what are we going to do? We're going to turn internally and we're going to make sure we're doing what we need to do. And we're going to leave all that stuff out there. We don't have time to really collaborate. We don't have time to really sit and help that other team out because we want to make sure we are the people who are not causing this thing to fall apart. Those are some of the things that happen. Those are some of the things that happen when you are experiencing growing pains. You have lapse of communication. Your team is overwhelmed and missing the intricate parts. They're not paying attention to detail, and people begin to retreat to silos. Now, we have some steps in what we can do to make sure that we go through growing pains the right way. But before we do that, I want to define the next GP for you, which is growth paralysis. And all growth paralysis is a matured and ignored extension of growing pains. Growth paralysis, let me say that again to you, is a matured and ignored extension of growing pains. It goes by the name of growth paralysis whenever growing pains are ignored and not handled properly, or whenever they're rushed through without the proper approach. They begin to sit in the culture, in the movement, in the body of your organization, your brand, your team, or your leadership, and they cause a complete paralysis. Now, many people will say, well, I would think that my organization not growing, my business not growing, the brand not growing or performing well, my leadership not helping things grow would cause paralysis. And that could be true. But one of the silent causes of growth paralysis is when growth is not handled the right way, it is not followed up correctly, when we actually let growth get out of control and we let it go on too far, it causes growth paralysis. Here are some characteristics of growth paralysis within your organization. Your people are completely overwhelmed. Your teams are overwhelmed. Your team leaders are overwhelmed. Everybody is overwhelmed. Everybody is overwhelmed. And so what happens is your people are completely overwhelmed. Work is more stressful than satisfying, and it's more painful than pleasurable. When you were at your smaller stages, people used to come and they used to say, man, I love working here. I'm satisfying my giftedness. I'm satisfying the itch that I need the world to scratch when it comes to me doing what I do, my purpose, the things, my talents. I love that. I'm being satisfied. And not only am I being satisfied, we are taking care of business in a way that it is fun to work here. It's pleasurable. Love my coworkers. I love my teams. Everybody's bouncing off of each other. We're collaborating. We're innovating. We have time for relationship. We're doing those things. But then when growth starts to see an uptick and people who used to be in charge of one area or two areas are now in charge of 4 areas, of 5 areas of the organization, they start to become stressed and work starts to become painful. Here's another thing that happens when you are in growth paralysis. People are not worried about acceleration of the team, of the company, or of the brand. They're just worried about survival. They have become short-sighted in the vision for their position and for the company, brand, or organization. They have stopped dreaming about what today means for 5 years from now, but instead are just trying to survive today and are dreading coming back tomorrow. We allow growth to grow so rapidly and it overwhelms the people that we're dealing with. These are some of the things that happen. Here's another characteristic. People are making up their mind if they're going to jump off the ship or if they're going to sink with it. When growth starts to overwhelm, when growing pains go on too long and it becomes growth paralysis, people start to pick their fate. Am I going to jump off this ship and board another ship? Or do I have reasons to just stay here and sink with it? Since approaching growth in the right mindset has been ignored for so long, and that is what's onset growth paralysis, since growth has been ignored for such a prolonged amount of time, people feel naive to believe that they can save the ship. Saving the ship is out of the question. Why? Because saving the ship will take some intentional time. Saving the ship will take some time for us to actually work through growth, that actually learn from our growth, to actually put in new systems and processes for growth. And they see that when that is not happening, they say, I'm just naive to believe that we can save this thing. I need to decide, am I going to sink with the ship or am I going to jump off of it? Remember, growth paralysis is just a matured and ignored acceleration of growing pains. Here's another thing. People start to use terms like, do you know what we can become? If we just did the right thing, if we just process properly, do you know what we can become, instead of having the belief that you are becoming what you dreamed of in the beginning as an organization or a company? People start to talk like it's over. Do you know what we could become? Instead of saying this is what we are becoming. And here's the last one. When we're dealing with growth paralysis, the work has usually fallen through the hands of the team, and it's only being taken care of by the captains of the team. Partly because others don't know what to do with the work, because they haven't been given instruction, they haven't been invited, the ball has not been passed to them. So they don't know what to do with the work, and the captains haven't taken the time to pass the ball because they feel so under pressure in the midst of this growth that they are the ones that have to do the scoring. They are the ones that have to carry out whatever needs to be carried out. They are the ones with the pressure on their back. They don't have time to allow anybody else to come in and help them. So there are some indicators of growth paralysis. If you are seeing that within your organization, 9 times out of 10, you are in the midst of growth paralysis. But here's the good news. Today, this is what I want to do. I want to help you assess and work with you to solve your issues, whether you are experiencing growing pains or growth paralysis. And whether it is me or someone else, you need help to work through this. Organizations need help working through growing pains and growth paralysis. You need a third party from outside of your team, or somebody that you have hired and you allow them to sit outside and look inside of your organization and tell you what you need for growth. In order to properly get through growing pains and make a full recovery from growth paralysis, you must understand these steps. Step number 1, growth must be processed. Growth must be processed. When your organization gets to a point where growth has made changes in who you are, you must stop and ask these questions. Get ready, write these questions down. Where are we now? How did we get here? Was the journey here helpful? How many who started with us on the journey are still here? If some have left, why have they moved on? How many new people have we added to the team? Why did they join our team? What made us attractive to them? Do we still have the same mission? Where are we on morale? What has changed about us? What new stuff do we really love, and what old stuff do we need to bring back? After our current growth is processed, then we can move on to the next step. But did you hear those questions? You need to ask, where are we now? And you need to get together as a team. I propose that teams, especially businesses who are bent on growth, organizations who are bent on growth, brands that are bent on growth, you need to be getting your team together for some kind of retreat every 6 months, at minimum, every 6 months. And then having team meetings or relational building exercises or times that you get together quarterly within those 6 months after you have the retreat. But you need to be having team retreats or planning sessions every 6 months to take the time to go through this. Growth must be processed. And since we're speaking about time, here's the next thing we see at number 2, that after our current growth is processed, our future growth must be planned. The next question we must ask is, where are we headed? And here are some of the questions that you can ask under the where are we headed category. What's the next hill we want to take? What is the most innovative and creative way we can get there? Do we have everybody in the right seat before we start this next level of growth? Is there any feedback from our last level of growth that is big enough for us to change policies, procedures, or practices? Do we have full team support? If not, are the differences small enough that the team is ready to try, even if they don't agree? What is our morale moving forward? Are we ready to move now, or do we wait a bit? Do we have the trust of our people? What is our plan to get to this next destination of growth? When should we launch our plan? How do we measure our progress? And how do we factor in culture building and cultural preservation during this next level of growth? Those are the questions you want to ask. You want to start by understanding that growth needs to be processed in your organization, and then growth needs to be planned. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with the last one. The goal for you is to be so ahead of your growth that the last thing that you want to be able to do is you want to be able to practice your growth. You want to be so far ahead of the curve when it comes to processing, planning your growth. You're out in front, so that gives you time to practice your growth within various parts of your organization. You don't just want to start throwing new tasks or new responsibilities or new ideas on people because you don't have time, because growth has snuck up on you. You want to be so far ahead and planned out for this growth that you can say, hey, I see this coming down the pipeline. I want your team to practice on handling this. How we've planned our growth and how we've processed our growth, your team is going to grow into doing this. So I want to give you an activity that's going to start to get the wheels spinning on how you'll carry this out as a team. I want to throw you some real life situations or some practice made up situations, but because we have planned for our growth and we have processed our growth, you have time to figure it out and you don't have to be on the gun, which is going to tilt you over into stress and which is going to make this position, this job, this task, this place, being a part of this team more painful than it is pleasurable. We want to have room to practice our growth. So that's all I wanted to do for you today, is give you a little value add when it comes to growth. Just help you map out what you need to do as organizational brand business leaders in order to make sure your teams are growing with you, the organization is growing with you, and that you are ahead of the curve. You don't want to be stuck behind the curve of growth. Every organization is going to go through growing pains, but the goal is not to get stuck in growth paralysis. Well, guys, I thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that this was helpful for you. You can get in touch with me at Darren, Darren, at invertstrategies.org, or you can send me a message or something on Instagram or Twitter. You can DM me. It's Darren_invert for both of those social medias, or you can find me on LinkedIn as Darren Greenfield, and you'll see the Invert Strategies pop up. But whatever you need, I want to get in touch with you. You can leave a comment at the bottom of this video. Send me a message. Let's get in touch. I want to help you and your organization work through growth. I want to help you establish the clarity that drives your genius and gets your organization, your brand, your business, or your leadership to the place where it needs to be. I hope you have a great day and continue to grow out there. Do it responsibly, do it properly, and do it in a way that you will work through growing pains and won't be stuck in growth paralysis. All right. See you next time.